everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley. Welcome to the scandalous Oprah Interview series. So, I have tried to film this quite a few times. I spent like a whole week on it and it just didn't pan out, so we're trying again. A whole week's worth of work I've decided is just trash. It wasn't exciting. It was boring. At least you can trust this has been very well researched. So the Oprah interview was a huge turning point for the monarchy in general, for the Harry and Meghan drama. A lot of you will ask, why are you revisiting this now? This old news? Well, because it has been completely scrubbed from the internet, which is significant and suspicious in and of itself, but also because it is such a huge piece to this story. The fact that they did this interview at all was a big deal, but the fact that it had such insane content and there was so many lies involved, it really colored not only Harry and Meghan's relationship and dynamic with the royal family and the UK and the monarchy, but it also heavily influenced the deals that they got, the press that they got, and public opinion of them. Those of you who saw it in real time know just how absurd it was, that you're sitting there like, what are they thinking? Making these lies on public TV like this that can be so easily fact-checked and disputed. Why would somebody do this? It was so bizarre and so weird. So it plays a really big role in their story and their background. And I think a lot of people would agree it's one of the more significant things that Harry and Meghan did just because its impact was so big. It was a big deal. So let's begin by discussing the fact that this has a global copyright ban. Anytime I tried to upload a video, like you guys, I had an entire 7-part series filmed and ready to go and edited. I spent hours and hours and hours, and it just got completely banned because they really do not want anybody hearing or seeing the Oprah interview ever again. For whatever reason. So those videos, and I'm sure other YouTubers have run into this as well, if you include more than a couple of really short clips, then it's just nobody's gonna get to see your video. It won't be discoverable, it can't be monetized, but that's not even the most important thing. The most important thing is that people can see it. People won't be able to find it or see it. It won't be viewable if you include too much of the Oprah interview in it, which is crazy. I've never seen this before. It's a big deal. And so in light of that, I had to kind of rework this series after it already had been worked on and became trash. So we're trying again. Because I cannot include significant portions of clips, I'm still able to include some, so you can hear and see some little clips. But because I can't include significant portions, what I'll do instead is put the transcript up, uninterrupted, on the screen, so that if you want the facts and to be able to read exactly what was said and what was said in context, you can. You have a factual reference running on screen during these videos. So that's what I'm going to do instead, so that you can really see for yourself and get the facts straight from the source. But of course, this really aggressive copyright ban should lead all of us to ask why. Why have such an intense ban? Either Harry and Meghan or Oprah or the CBS network, which originally aired it, are behind it and just never, ever want this interview to be seen again. Not even heard. Even just audio clips get flagged. So why? Is it defamation lawsuit risk? Possibly, quite possibly, because they lied a lot. Is it the lies themselves? The credibility? The backfiring and the backlash that came? Was it that Harry was taken off guard by what Meghan did and said? What's your theory? They've never explained why it was scrubbed from the internet within about 30 days of airing. That's weird. That usually doesn't happen. Also, this series is just a lot. There was a lot of lies and mistruths and whatnot to discuss, and it was 90 minutes long almost when it aired. There were 17 lies discovered immediately by fact checkers who were watching in real time, and over time, more than 30 have been found in retrospect, and from other journalists and people coming out to dispute Meghan and Harry's claims. So for our series, I've put together a little lie count of sorts, which will be in the corner of the screen. It'll pop up anytime we're discussing another one of Meghan or Harry's lies throughout their interview, so that you can track as the series go just how many times they lied. But when I say lie and I say lie count in this series and that little number that's going to pop up in the corner, it indicates things that are lies, but also things that are lies by omission, or statements that have since been disputed by other credible sources or the other parties involved. Things that are exaggerated by Harry and Meghan, like gross exaggerations that are just obviously difficult to believe and embellished, but also things that are inconsistent with other statements that Harry and or Meghan have said at other points in time, either before or since this interview happened. So that little number is going to include all of those sorts of things that you could just kind of put into the category of misinformation. There are just so many things in this interview that are near impossible to believe that the biggest question I've been left with is, why would Harry and Meghan do this on TV, lie and exaggerate the way a child might, embellishing stories like an immature weirdo? What is this all about? What was going on in their minds that made them think this would be okay or be a good idea at all? We're getting into all of those sorts of questions in this Oprah series, and I'm going to break it up into a few shorter discussion videos and analyses to make it more watchable. Small doses. And so today we're going to start with the first portion of the interview through the first couple of commercial breaks. The first real lines of questions that come from Oprah focus on the wedding. The way Meghan talks about her wedding and the experience around it comes across a little self-indulgent, just an observation, but also her tone comes across almost disappointed, which is pretty weird. You're talking about your wedding, which was paid for and very, very expensive and a big deal. And this is kind of square one for Meghan. She doesn't endear herself to anybody, like ever. She focuses on making things seem dramatic or pretentious or negative or victim-y, not realizing that it really obliterates any relatability or likability at all. Talking about the wedding would have been a great opportunity to communicate gratitude or joy or recognize your privilege, so to speak. But no. The first big lies come right out of the gate, wasting no time. She claims to have never looked her husband up online. She claims she did no research about what it would mean to marry into the royal family. And this bizarre lie that Doria and her did not know that Diana did an interview until a couple months ago.
My mom even said to me a couple months ago, she said, did Diana ever do an interview? Now, I can say, yes, a very famous one, but my mom doesn't even know that, right?
Nobody bought what she was selling, not even Oprah.
I didn't do any research about what that would mean. No. I've never looked up my husband online. I just didn't feel a need to because everything that I needed to know he was sharing with me, right?
Meghan really expected people to believe that she and her mom didn't know that Diana had done an interview? At the time of this interview with Oprah, it was 2021, they had been around Harry and the royal sphere for years. And they still had never heard of this interview? No way. Ridiculous. Also, Prince William, during this span of time, had addressed the interview that Diana had been manipulated into giving, and he gave a heavy publicized speech. Prince William was diligently protecting his mother's memory while Prince Harry and Meghan, great contrast here, tried to take ownership of it and use it. But really, there's no possible way that this conversation took place between Doria and Meghan just a couple months before this Oprah interview, that they still had no idea about this. That's just absurd. Insane. Also, it's very difficult to believe that she never did any research. And beyond it being difficult to believe, it's a bad look. If Meghan wants us to believe that, then she also needs to accept that she's communicating to the public that she's ignorant to her husband's culture and cares not to learn about it. She's not displaying any degree of care or thoughtfulness towards Harry's life, his role, his title, his culture, his family, where he comes from. That's ignorance, prejudice even. And it demonstrates a real lack of foresight and intelligence to not do any research into what this means for her. Although, I don't believe that she didn't do any research, so it's a bad lie both in substance and delivery. This never looking Harry up online falsehood is insane. Everyone looks up their spouse or boyfriend these days. Everyone. She had the opportunity to play this differently in so many ways and for so many reasons. Just as a human, to not be offensive and rude towards her in-laws' culture, but also as a public figure in terms of PR. Something like responding to that question with, of course, but I realized early on that reading things online came with its own set of problems. I didn't want to go into anything with preconceived notions. Articles aren't fully accurate anyway, so I avoided looking anyone up or doing research for that reason. That would have made way more sense, it would have been believable, and it would have came across a lot better. Like, of course that's a reasonable thing to think and to do, but I tried not to so that I didn't get influenced by things and rather just meet the people and try not to get distracted by all of that. Next, Meghan essentially says that Americans as a whole, romanticize what being a royal is like, that you only know what's in fairy tales as Americans, and that the reality of royal life is very different to that, especially the day-to-day working royal job. He notes that she never romanticized it, but yet was dissatisfied with the reality of it, indicating that she did have unrealistic expectations. Projection, perhaps? Contradictory, for sure. Another PR mistake that she often makes is blanket statements. Not just in this interview, but like always. People don't like being categorized according to some rando who is clearly very out of touch. She says Americans, all of them, are so ignorant to the royal family that they only know what the fairy tales say. What nonsense. A huge error in public relations.
There was no way to understand what the day-to-day was going to be like. I didn't romanticize any element of it, but I think as Americans especially, what do you know about the royals is what you read in fairy tales.
The curtsy comes up. And she has a very different version than what she told in Netflix. Here, she claims to not remember the curtsy at all, so how did she magically remember it for Netflix? We'll never know. She says she couldn't Google how to curtsy because she was in the car. How does that make sense? And that Fergie and Harry helped her practice in front of Royal Lodge. Oprah asked her about meeting the Queen for the first time, and Meghan instead focused on her curtsy prep and, interestingly, cushioned the story with a lot of irrelevant and unnecessary details, like who lives at Royal Lodge and things like that she knew usually. And she really meanders before she gets to the part where she met the Queen. This does tend to lend itself to a dishonest vibe, but it also demonstrates narcissism in action by wanting to hold the stage for longer than necessary to answer the question.
Oh, great. I loved my grandmother. I used to take care of my grandmother. This is great. Right, do you know how to curtsy? What? Do you know how to curtsy?
Did you Google how to curtsy?
No, we were in the car.
Okay.
We were in the car 5 minutes
How
from
does one
arriving.
curtsy?
And apparently I did a very deep curtsy, and I don't remember it.
Next, they're in the chicken coop. And this is where she claims she's most excited to get back to basics and living authentically, which simultaneously implies that they want a quiet, simple life, which we now know not to be the case, as evidenced by their actions. But it also implies that the royals are not living authentically. But one of the most problematic, irresponsible, and biggest lies came at this point of the interview, and this is still within the first couple of segments before commercial breaks. This is where she claims that they got married 3 days beforehand and does this really ill-received statement that the wedding was a spectacle for the world, not for them. And she has this really negative tone to it, which was a terrible idea.
You know, 3 days before our wedding, we got married. No one knows that, but we called the Archbishop and we just said, look, this spectacle is for the world.
The Archbishop of Canterbury had to come out and make a statement that no, what Meghan said in the CBS interview is a lie. They got married. Their legal marriage was the one that was televised, not in the backyard like Meghan tried to say. It was really selfish of her to put him in that position and to ignore the legal implications of dragging a third person into your lie, no matter what. That was really bad. Next, Oprah tries to sort of compare some headlines with Meghan and talk to Meghan about the headlines, and she poorly acts like she doesn't hear them. Slips in this part. Every time Oprah tries to bring up headlines, Meghan claims she never heard the first headline Oprah discusses, but then the second headline Oprah mentions, Meghan's like, I did hear about that one. This is very see-through. How strange. Not a coincidence. Clearly, she's trying to make it seem like she didn't pay attention to headlines when she very obviously did. Oprah reads out Hurricane Meghan, a headline talking about all the staff members who left after Meghan came on board. And next comes a headline about who made who cry leading up to the wedding, and they use Kate for Catherine, Princess of Wales. And while I understand and respect she prefers Catherine, Princess of Wales, in the spirit of summarizing what Meghan, Harry, and Oprah say, I will use Kate because that is what they use. And sometimes I'm quoting what they say. So please excuse the misuse of Kate in this context. So this brings us to the crying drama. If you don't know, there were headlines a few months after the wedding that Meghan had made Catherine cry over the flower girl dresses. Princess Charlotte was in the wedding. This was about her dress and or outfit for the day, apparently, allegedly. Meg claims that the narrative with Kate just didn't happen.
You making Kate Middleton cry?
This I heard about. That was a turning point.
She says that she couldn't understand why Kate wasn't doing what everyone else was doing, which was being supportive, asserting that Catherine was like the only person who was not being supportive. How rude, petty, and obviously exaggerated.
Did you make Kate cry?
No.
Was there a situation where she might have cried or she could have cried?
No, the reverse happened. I would have never wanted that to come out about her. Ever, even though it had happened. I protected that from ever being out in the world.
Catherine was advocating for her daughter's comfort. As a parent, consenting to your child being in someone else's wedding and participating in it, then you're adopting a responsibility for what they're wearing, making sure they're well rested and they're on time and feeling good, and you need to be paying attention to what they're wearing. And Catherine was advocating for her to be able to wear tights to make the shoes more comfortable and for the dress to fit properly. So it was completely appropriate for Catherine to be concerned over the flower girl dresses, and a complete mischaracterization, removal from context, and inappropriate for Meghan to be upset that Catherine cared about what her daughter would be wearing at this wedding that would be televised to the world.
It didn't make sense to not be just doing what everyone else was doing, which was trying to be supportive, knowing what was going on with my dad and whatnot. It made me cry. Everyone in the institution knew it wasn't true.
Something that really didn't paint Meghan in a very good light was she says she's not divulging this detail, that according to her, Catherine made her cry, to be disparaging to anyone. But then she goes on to say all these other details. That, no, Catherine made me cry, I didn't make her cry. She even goes into this gross exaggeration that everyone knew that I didn't make Catherine cry, and that Catherine made me cry. Everybody knew this. Okay, Meghan is being disparaging, she is exaggerating, she is being petty by indulging in this line of questioning at all. There is no way for Meghan to know that Catherine never shed a tear. There is no way for Meghan to know that everyone knew that this version that was in the tabloids was false. That's just ridiculous. As a wife and as an in-law for Meghan, even from a PR point of view, Meghan should have responded that it was an unfortunate story that wasn't true as far as she knew. Remember, there's no way for Meghan to know these things for a fact, but there's nothing wrong with her saying that as far as she knew it wasn't true. If that is true, she could say, as far as I know, that was not true. But you know what the palace did do? They arranged for them to attend Wimbledon together, to have a joint engagement after that drama and show that there were no hard feelings between the ladies and try to make things better from an optics perspective. Because remember, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And it's much more powerful to stopping a narrative than to put out statements which lead to people analyzing them and argue with them further and poking holes in them. Kind of like what happened with this Oprah interview. Anyway, this whole segment came off really, really bad, made her look really petty and really small, and mean girl vibes, just to discuss it at all, came across very, very mean girl, because everybody knows Catherine is very, very kind, has a great reputation, and is very private, like extremely private. Catherine, Princess of Wales, has almost never given interviews and public statements up until like this year. We saw these things, these announcements about big things happening in her life. But before that, the only significant interview that Catherine had done was her engagement interview. That's a big deal. So for somebody like that, who is that private and not seeking the spotlight and seeking to make conversations out there in the world public, to have somebody go and give this manipulated account of things that has been heavily disputed by parties close to the sources, close to the palace. Meghan's version of events has been heavily disputed, and there are very reliable sources that Meghan did make Catherine cry. What a nightmare. Poor Catherine to go through this situation. How heartbreaking, how embarrassing, even though it doesn't really matter. It's like just sad that somebody would do that to her or to anybody. So unfair of Meghan. And it came across that way in the interview. People didn't receive it well. People weren't like, ooh, is Catherine a meanie? No, people were like, that was kind of weird of Meghan to bring up at all. You know, especially because a lot of people have experienced the stress leading up to weddings and the difficulties of dealing with, you know, a lot of people involved. And this is a wedding on a massive scale. So it wasn't exactly surprising or salacious that there were emotions running high. Also, Catherine had just had Prince Louis a couple months before the wedding. So all of these factors made it really, really, really look bad for Meghan more so than anybody else. Next, Oprah compares headlines from Kate to Meghan about baby bump holding.
Since you don't read things, let me just tell you what was said.
Okay.
There were stories where Kate was being praised for holding her baby bump.
Oh gosh, have I done it since we've been sitting
Yes,
down?
you've been doing it the whole time. Meghan can't keep hands off her baby bump for pride or vanity.
What does it have to do with pride or vanity?
Seemed like it touched a nerve. This was a story because of Meghan's incessant coat flicking, which was a really weird maneuver. She would kind of pull her coat back to reveal the baby bump when she was out and about on engagements instead of just leave the coat alone. Or if she wasn't pulling a coat back, she was holding her bump like top and bottom, or even holding her bump before it was a real bump. It just looked like she ate too much Chipotle. So that's why it was a story that Meghan was touching her bump constantly. It wasn't a unfair analysis, let's put it that way. But it clearly touched a nerve. She really did snap at Oprah over this. It's kind of odd. And then Meghan responded that the press really seemed to want a hero and a villain story. And then they kind of drop this narrative and there's another commercial break. So that's where we'll end for part 1. But Meghan really did make herself a target for the media through all of her actions and statements and shenanigans and not following protocol, not dressing for the occasion, being difficult in the working environments, all of this stuff really made her a target for the media to criticize. She should have taken her time more and taken more guidance. She really should have. This first portion of the interview also really revealed to the viewers that while the interview wasn't necessarily discussed in terms of show notes of like, I'm going to ask you this, 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 and this, step by step by step, it wasn't discussed in that way because Oprah has said at the beginning of the interview that it wasn't planned ahead of time. But it's clearly an expansion upon conversations these two have had previously. It's obvious that they've talked about these things before. And so they clearly had a bit of a consensus on the general direction that this interview would take. So that also comes across as a little bit deceitful. Also, remember, many sources from Meghan's childhood have come forward to say that she was actually really interested in the royals, and specifically Diana growing up. So Meghan clearly would have had a lot more background knowledge than she's letting on here. Who is this for? These statements that she didn't know who the royal family were, this facade. Is it for Harry to keep up the story that she had sold him, that she had no idea who he was? Or is it for the public to try to combat the fact that it's well documented that she essentially pursued Harry and copies Diana in a creepy and weird way? Why do you think she's so fixated on driving home the point or trying to give off the impression that she didn't know much about the royal family when she very clearly did? That's it for part 1 today. Thank you so much for joining me. Please do subscribe so you do not miss part 2. I'll also put all these videos into a playlist together to make it easy for you to find the next one. Have a happy day, everybody. Bye.